Hey guys, what's happening? So with this one, we're getting back into Ultimate Invasion, where not only do we learn more about the Maker's twisted methods, but also we get Howard Stark revealing the truth to his son Tony, who doesn't like any of this one bit. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so starting this off, we begin at the funeral of Obadiah Stane, which takes place just days after he was killed in the insane attack in Latveria, which was targeted at the Maker. And at the time, we talked about these multiple visions, Captain America's and Thor's, and how they were sent here from the far future. And that's something that we'll dive deeper into in just a little bit. But here at this funeral, we pick up with Howard Stark and his son Tony, where after the service, the two of them have a conversation that I believe is going to play a huge role later on down the line. And maybe way later, depending on how you look at it. But while they're here, Tony tells his dad that he's sorry about what happened, because this was just terrible, because he knows how close his father and Obadiah Stane were. So Tony goes on to ask his dad, what is he going to do now? And it's interesting how Howard's initial response, it's really just him asking his son Tony, what if he told him to pack his bags because they're getting on a plane so they can run away and live a very quiet, small, and peaceful life, which is something that Tony thinks is amazing. But he tells his dad, like, that's not gonna happen, is it? And Howard just says no, it's not. But then Tony goes on to let his dad know that he saw the attack on the feed, but then they cut all the coverage. It was a total blackout, nothing for an entire day. And then suddenly his dad showed up with Obadiah's body, which now causes Tony to ask his dad, what happened in Latveria? So from here, Howard tells Tony what happened over there just 2 days ago, where following the attack, he was approached by Emmanuel DaCosta, who on Earth 616 is the father of Robert DaCosta, Sunspot, who inherited his wealth after his father was deceased, but here on Earth 6160, he's very much still alive, which just falls in line with a lot of what we've seen here, Howard Stark being a prime example. But going around the room, Howard sees a number of others, most of which he only recognizes names and faces, but Howard doesn't know them too well, because before, Obadiah used to do all the meeting and greeting. And as it turns out, Howard kinda had a crash course on this when he tried to speak to Yoshida, who at a first glance you might want to call him Sunfire. But on Earth 6160, he's the Sun Emperor, and he doesn't speak to anyone when he has the mask on. And if Tony knew the protocol, he would have known when the Sun Emperor is wearing his mask, you can only communicate to him through his voice, the Viper. And going around the room, you have Ra, who only speaks when the sun is out, and the inverse is true for the moon of Khonshu. And next, Emmanuel introduces Howard to Henry Duggery, the Captain Britain of Earth 6160, who has both the Sword of Might and the Amulet of Right. So I guess that man just told Merlin and Roma, let me get both of them things, which makes him more powerful than most Captain Britons. But as they're having this conversation, Magic storms in, demanding to know who was behind this attack. And she tells everyone in the room that they all need to get things rolling so they can go after whoever did this. And with Magic going on about getting everyone together and going after their attackers, this confuses Howard, because as far as what he knows and what's public information, the Rasputins are the enemy. And at some point in time, everyone in this room has been at odds with the other. And he even goes on to give them examples, like the Eastern Conflict, the event in the Pacific, the Winter Apocalypse, and he asks, like, should he go on? But the Hulk tells him that he promises, however it might appear to the world at large, there are no enemies in this room. And he lets Howard know that what he's perceived is the world as he knows it. But the truth is, amongst the 7 territories represented by the people in this room, each of them will play the part of the quote-unquote adversary, just as the Rasputins do right now. And over time, each of them will take their turn. While in the other territories, their citizens have something else to focus on, with their eyes constantly on external threats, rather than the people in each territory focusing on internal failures. And everyone else in this room agrees with the Maker on upholding this plan for the greater good. And right there, Howard Stark was just like, wait, what? And he tells him that this just might be the most insidious thing that he's ever heard. But the Hulk just goes on to tell him, to be fair, not all of them agree with such universal assumptions, because he believes that some people are capable of achieving a state of inner calm, much like he's done with him devoting his life to it. But most people are incapable of maintaining that state in perpetuity. They can't handle the quiet. They can't let their action be inaction. They can't maintain serenity with all of the hysterical babbling that surrounds them. and it's something that the Hulk tells Howard Stark that he wishes wasn't true. As the Maker steps in saying, but it is, and it always has been. And the Maker tells them, of course. Focusing on the shortcomings of mankind's nature makes it easier for those in this room to gloss over the other major reasons we do this. The little people hate us, we giants who rule the land. It's not how it used to be in the ages gone. Back then it wouldn't have mattered. The powerful would just roll right over the powerless if need be. We could build an empire on their bones if we wanted, but now they are a collective, instantaneously aware of just how many of them there are, and how much they uniformly hate people like us, which is why it's necessary to give them something else to focus on, which we've gotten very good at doing. But with the Maker giving this brief monologue, Howard is just more or less like, yeah, that's worse. And he tells the Maker before he got here, he said that he found all of this to be insidious, but now he thinks that was just too kind of a word. And the Maker tells him that Howard can choose whatever word he wishes, but it won't change who they are and who he is, because Howard Stark, rich, brilliant, and powerful, he is one of them. And Howard tells him that it doesn't feel like it, but he does have one question. So the Maker's like, of course, ask anything you want. So Howard asks if all of this well choreographed dance is to keep the people happy so that they can get on with the important work that giants do, then would he mind letting him know what that work is? Which now puts a smile on the Maker's face, because he's like, hey, now you're asking the right question. Now we're getting somewhere. But before we continue what happened here, we go back to the present day, 2 days later, in the same conversation between Howard and Tony. And now with Tony being filled in on this portion, he asks his dad what's he gonna do. And Howard is very honest, he just tells his son that he doesn't know. There's too many variables for a definitive answer, the scale of it literally reaches across the globe. So he asks his son Tony if he has any bright ideas. And Tony pauses for a minute before telling his dad that he thinks he should fight them. But Howard believes that that would only prove some people's point. And then there's the small issue that he might lose. But his son, young Tony Stark, he's very passionate about resolving this. So he tells his dad that there's right and there's wrong. And this is wrong. But Howard just lets his son know that he's mistaking right and wrong for good and evil. And Tony asks his dad if he believes that Obadiah knew about all this. And Howard tells him that he doesn't know. But he'd like to pretend that Obadiah didn't know, so that he can remember Obadiah as the man he thought he was. Because he knows that he'll never get a real answer to that question, at least not from Obadiah. And he's not exactly sure if he wants one. And with Tony just looking at his dad, Howard asks him what? And Tony tells him, you should fight them and win. And as their helicopter arrives at the pad, where Howard is getting ready to take the Quinjet back to Latveria, he tells Tony that he's still processing what he's learned, and that he does have some ideas that are getting closer to the edges of where he might start. But he asks Tony to give him a couple weeks before he's just disappointed in his dad, and give his old man some time before he figures out what he's going to do. And Tony lets his dad know that he can help him. But as Howard goes on to board the Quinjet, he tells Tony the point of the exercise, the reason why I would even want to fight and win, is so that you can outlive us all. But I promise, if I need you, I'll let you know. Which from there, Tony's just like, okay, before he calls his dad one more time. And he tells him to be careful, only for Howard to tell him, that's not how it works, son. Careful doesn't come with winning. Which are words that I believe Tony's going to remember for quite some time. And now with Howard going back to Latveria, we now jump back one day, back when Howard was still in Latveria, when the Maker took him inside the city, where Howard asked the Maker, where are they? Only for the Maker to ask him if he's never been inside the city. Because with the Maker already having stepped out of time and traveled through time, he should know this, but because a portion of his brain's missing, with the rest of it scattered throughout his body, like we saw in the previous issue, the Maker doesn't have all of his memories quite together yet. And as they continued, the Maker took Howard to what's considered to be the darkest corner of the city. And the Maker's honest with him. He tells Howard that this is more of a prison, but he brought Howard here to show him who he's going to be working with, who's a person that some would say is the smartest man in the universe. And this person is Earth 6160 Reed Richards, who the Maker now has as Dr. Doom, which in a way explains why they're in Latveria. But also this provides a little more detail to what we were shown in the Maker's memory log, where we saw Howard Stark marked as controlled, as well as Reed Richards marked as controlled, which still has me curious about the death of the other 3 members of the Fantastic Four, because I still want to see that backstory. But also with this reveal, it gives us a brief look into the Maker's response to 616 Reed's answer in issue 1, when the maker asked Reed if he could do it all over again. Would he erase him from existence? When at the time, Reed said yes, and the maker told him that he would keep that in mind, which now just seems like the maker's doing that in a more allegorical way. And from here, we then head into the far future, where the multiple Captain Americas and Visions and Thors came from, where we see one Cap saying 4,000 years of careful genetic engineering was all for nothing. Despair and the end of all things was before us, but we did not yield. To where then one of the Thors says, now we have 6,000 years of better stock, righteous blood, and your armies have been replaced. How longer must we wait, master? How much longer can we wait? As a hand goes up, silencing them. As this figure goes on to say, do you see how he hides? In this game we play, I, ageless and immortal, in real time, my adversary, a creature of a temporal vault, a time thief, if there ever was one. And what do we say of all pretenders? As they respond, their time will come. So the figure says, tell me of my legions. As the others then say, they are infinite, they are immortal, they are ready to die. And lastly, this figure tells them all, this pleases me, it makes me eager. I have heard your cries, I have heard you ask me, Kang, is it time? And so I tell you truly, the time is now. As the Kang of their future is revealed, and though we're not specifically told who this is, 4,000 years in the future with 6,000 years of better stock, wearing his Iron Kang suit, I can't help but to think that this is either Tony Stark or at least a product of what he did in an attempt to help his father, because in other cases we've seen Kang be a descendant of Reed or of Doom, and I want to say on Earth 1610 we got a story where Sue Richards from an alternate future based on theirs became Kang, which by the time this goes up I'll have it linked to the end of the video. But as it stands, I don't think Earth 6160 Reed is getting those kind of visitations. And not to mention, at the time that a majority of this story is taking place, Susan Storm is deceased. But I don't know, it's still a bit too early to even say who this actually is. I just wanted to tell you guys a couple things that were crossing my mind, but all will be revealed in time. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. You already know the drill. Let me know your thoughts and your theories down in the comments below. And we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.